Welcome, everyone, to the EvoSec podcast. This is Aaron Davis and Eric Davis, the Tactical Twins. How you doing, bro?
Man, I'm doing great. We've got our brother John on here, so, man, I'm excited about this.
We sure do. We have John Valentine of Deeds of Arms. And, man, we may have not met yet, but I feel a friendship with John, just interacting with him through messaging and online and texting and all that stuff. Just a good dude. So, man, thanks for coming back on, John. This is your second time, and it will not be the last. We got to make that clear too.
Yeah, guys, I feel the same way about you guys. I feel a kinship with you all as well, and I definitely, I appreciate you guys having me on. So thank you for the kind words and of course, the invite. So it's always great talking to y'all.
Awesome. Well, real quick, so you were on our episode 56, and we went pretty deep into your background. So listeners can go back if they want to learn even more. But why don't you give us a real quick rundown on who you are, where you're from, and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, so I teach people combatives and firearms training, and I try to teach it from the lens of fighting. Jiu-Jitsu black belt from Matt Larson, combatives black belt, and I went through the entire range master instructor development program, and I graduated Top Gun, and that's about it.
Hey, you smoked it, buddy.
That is no easy feat. I can tell you, man. Being an advanced level, both Eric and I, there's some awesome shooters there, and I would have loved to have been number 5 in that list. So top shot, that's kick ass, man. Good job.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I definitely needed it, so that way people can know that I'm not just a jiu-jitsu guy. So that was definitely a necessity. So,
I think
it worked out.
I think you made the right choice. I mean, it's well understood for those that know inside the industry that the range master pedigree is top notch, and it definitely proves that you know what you're doing if you've made it through all 3 of those classes for sure. Well, John, so I'll just start out with saying this. Most people within the firearms community now are well aware that unfortunately, we lost James Yeager of Tactical Response, passed away a couple of weeks ago. And what we want to say is Godspeed to him, and we pray for his family. I know that his last wishes were he didn't want people being sad about it. Definitely didn't want to remember the day he passed, and more remember the good things about him. And we were kind of going back and forth a little bit, like we do sometimes. And I saw you mention on one of the social media, I think it was one of your posts, where you had spoke about the influence that James Yeager had on you. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that you and I shared that connection. And so I just figured, we talked offline, said we would say a couple of cool things about how James and his company influenced us, man. So, yeah, man, just give me some little bit about how James affected you, and I can give you some of my thoughts as well.
Well, I mean, I got into the gun game a little bit. I fell into the instructor bit kind of by accident. As far as getting involved and getting serious about training, that was really just circumstances put on me where I got out of the Army in 2012, and then Hurricane Sandy hit, and then like later on the Sandy Hook incident happened as well. And basically the whole world demonized everybody who was a gun owner. So even though I lived in the the harmonic utopia of New York City, I mean, which is, I use that kind of tongue in cheek, but I spent most of my time in the South, and so I've grown up around gun owners. I've been around firearms since I was 18 years old. So coming up and then seeing all these things happen, seeing people's public, personal information being released to the public by, the the Journal News in New York City. They released everybody's personal info, including
That's right.
Judge Janine Pirro, right? So then James Yeager comes out and he says his thing. I won't repeat it on here because I don't want to, get it. But he was about that life, and he wasn't afraid to speak. And from then on, I just started kind of paying attention to what he had to say. And then he contracted, did his thing, and one of the first podcasts I ever did. I mean, I was, I still don't consider myself an authority figure for the most part. I'm nobody in the industry. I'm just, talking with like-minded friends. That's the way I look at
That's
it.
us
But,
too.
um, James is a nationally known, internationally known firearms instructor. Reached out to him, and he came on my show with no problem, and we spoke, and uh, he had people follow me and stuff. Like he really used his influence to help me out. He didn't have to at all, and it was like, um, yeah, so that says a lot about somebody. It's like you can listen to what he says and it can be polarizing and stuff like that, but like, hell, I mean, as a man of principle, I respect that. It's like you get what you see with him, right? Like he's got a lot of great sayings, and like more people hate me than know who you are. Like that's like that great one. And the other thing of like the penalty for treason is exile. And
Yep.
I love that, because that's how I mean, I haven't articulated that way, but that's what I do. If people cross me, they do something that's going to hurt my friends. They do hurt my family, even in the business world. Like if you're doing shady stuff, like I disassociate with you. So it's exile to an extent. But um, I think, yeah, you may not want to be exactly like James Yeager, but 100% the world needs more men like James Yeager. And the other thing is that his life doesn't measure um, what you need to be doing per se as a firearms instructor for tactics or training or marksmanship, any of that. It's about the positive impact you make on people's lives to make them better people. And I think that's something that is overlooked. I mean, of course, you got people who are cowardly enough to come on social media and run their mouth, say, badmouth the guy after he's dead. I think there's
Mm.
nothing more cowardly than bad mouthing a man who is
Absolutely.
impossible to defend himself. But it's bad enough talking about somebody from the safety of a screen. But um, I think people, they don't have perspective, and that's that. And for as far as what's truly important, and as far as all the metrics that matter, raising a strong, capable family of loving people. I mean, who wouldn't want to go out exactly the way they want, exactly the way they want to, with exactly who they want to be with?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Like, what can you say?
Yeah, and you kind of hit it on the head. Sometime when we say polarizing, I think there's nothing there's nothing wrong with being assertive. I mean, and that's really what James was more than anything else, was just simply assertive.
Yep.
And it makes people that are insecure, it upsets them sometimes if he's can be harsh at times, or could be. And it created some haters, but like you said, man, um
Let me
James
ask you
Yeager.
guys a question real quick though. I mean, just from what I see with like the interactions, with I guess we'll say Gen Z, or just the interactions in general, just the way people talk. It's like, would you guys say that like people are just so used to uh, people, bullshitting them or just being phony, that they're just so used to that they can't recognize when someone is just being straight up and honest?
Yeah, I totally agree. Cynicism is definitely alive, and I wouldn't say, well, it's alive. Cynicism is absolutely the way a good percentage of
Well,
individuals are. Go ahead, Aaron.
and what I would say too is the real intense trying to control language. Now, I'm not getting deep into this, but what I mean is there's always a promotion of when something gets said, whatever it is, that's deemed offensive, there's going to be a battle cry to make sure people are offended by that. So people just gather up those things that they think they should be offended by, and then they walk around and listen to and get interaction on social media, and they're easily offended. It's a narcissism that's grown, and when you take it back to one single thing, the three of us are about being real men, being great fathers, being great husbands, being able to use violence to protect us and our families if we have to. And that's offensive to some people. And then when you have someone like James Yeager, he did not have time to mess around with stuff he thought was bullshit.
Yep.
So and yeah, people again with the current state of being easily offended, he did upset some people. But
Well, and I'd kind of like to hit on a few highlights of number one, how I found James Yeager, and kind of a little bit of enunciation of how he affected me positively. And I found Get Off the X forums, and I kind of miss forums, frankly.
Yeah.
There was a little more, I know social media is where it's at, and there's discourse on social media that's kind of starting to shape like forums. But man, I miss forums because it was long form discussions. We had Get Off the X was an awesome forum. And then that led me with Mike Brown finding Total Protection Interactive, of course, with, Craig Douglas and all the ShivWorks collective, where most of those folks hung out. But back to Get Off the X, I learned a lot on that forum. And I remember James posting on, some of his DVDs and stuff. So, and I have more somewhere around here, but I picked up this fighting pistol DVD, and there's a lot of stuff I learned, and it's some of the things I don't do as much anymore, but there's a lot of principles that I learned from this DVD, and then continuing to interact with folks on that forum. And then in 2007, my good friend Greg and I met there at Tactical Response to take fighting rifle. And we had the pleasure of staying in the team room, which was an awesome experience in and of itself. Getting to stay in James's house, right, downstairs in his basement, was effectively, it's kind of like the principle of how the platoons sleep in the same quarters and they build this camaraderie together. It's a similar aspect. And I also, that very weekend, finally met Paul Gomez, which, if people don't know who Paul Gomez was, he was quite the impressive trainer himself, and he was the quintessential training junkie, and is the reason why we get to go to open enrollment, ECQC, and ShivWorks classes. He's the one that facilitated that. So
Nice.
got to hang out with him all weekend and take the fighting rifle. There's still the way that they taught the communications and the bounding techniques, unlike, the Army teaches it, a certain way. But the way Tactical Response taught it was more of a much more condensed version. Communications a lot easier and more intuitive. And I still use that today. I pass it on to anybody I can.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I mean, I can go on, but I took away so much from that training experience there, and getting to hang out with James was awesome too. And he was actually way cooler in person. Like most people say, he just a down to earth person, and now he'd still get mouthy with people, just bullshitting. But yeah, it was a real cool experience. And he and his business trained hundreds of thousands of people literally to be harder to kill, including some of our special operators and, military and law enforcement and civilians. So, I mean, tactical response is massive in the industry and deserves to be recognized as such.
Yeah. Yeah. Not to mention, you have all these people posting, flags in support of Ukraine. Like the man went out there,
Oh yeah,
with ALS and trained some of the rebels out there too.
exactly. Which
So,
was the
guys,
last. Go ahead, Aaron.
so I'm glad you're confirming that right now, because I saw that he was going to do that, but I never saw him
Yeah, he
actually
did.
go through. That's awesome.
Yeah. Stud, man. Stud.
He put his money where his mouth is, or was, I should say, and he did it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, just like like you mentioned it, when he was in law enforcement and he decided to take some time off from law enforcement and went downrange to Iraq, as a contractor. I think he worked for Edinburgh Risk, I think was the company that he worked for, and he got after it.
Yeah.
He
And he
was
was
in
there
all.
with the Bundy Ranch with that standoff. I mean,
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
he was part of an effort to make the American government move.
Yep. I
Like
mean, he
who
was a
does that?
legitimate patriot, man.
So
Yeah, and countless times I spent on his YouTube channel learning a ton. You know, so well, awesome. We just wanted to say some nice words about James Yeager, and that we're all going to miss him for certain, but we're going to celebrate his life like he wanted us to. So, I guess on his birthday, we'll start commemorating that. At least maybe a shot of whiskey or a range day in his name, and pass on some of the knowledge he passed on to us.
yeah, we can at least start by taking up becoming better domestic tourist. So
Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, excuse me. Well, John, I think we'll go ahead and move on to some of the meat of what you kind of wanted to talk about. And
yeah,
man, if you don't mind, I've got some data here. I think you and I off or prior to the show, we kind of we're on the same page pretty much. But man, can you just start off some highlights about recruiting issues within the military and law enforcement?
man. I mean, it's like if I wanted to make sure I never recruited anybody again, I'd do exactly all the things that the military and law enforcement is doing right now. It's like they're just trying to throw money at a problem, right? And like the economy isn't the same as it was in, like, I first joined the military in 2003. The economy is not the same. I don't think. I think social media, YouTube, Twitch, and all these like monetized platforms, I think these things are as much of a wild card as birth control, right? Because I mean,
Yep.
if we really break it down, what is birth control? Really, that means only women have control over who procreates, right? Like that's a true thing. Okay. And now with these social media platforms, I can get a minimum wage job, making, let's say I make 750, right? And I'm making $500 a month. Let's say I'm doing that and I got a Twitch account. I start streaming at like 16 or something like that. If I'm smart, I can build that Twitch to making, I don't know, 40 grand a year. And I can, you know what I mean? And I'm making another, $500. I'm making 46 grand a year. I'm making twice what an Army private makes at 18. If I just focus a little bit on content creation. Like it's like, they were asked, a couple years ago, as far as like in China, and asked the kids, I was like, hey, so what do you guys want to be growing up? And they said something within the STEM field, right? Like engineer, science, astronaut, stuff like that. Kids in America are wanting to become YouTubers, and like because they recognize what's going on there. It's like, so the question then becomes like, all right, so why would anyone join the military? And it's because they're looking to punch their man card, because I don't care how many millions of dollars you make playing video games. You're still a video game dork.
Yep.
And look, as much money as Jeff Bezos has, and I know people are probably going to disagree with me or call, like, say it's BS, but like, I don't want to be Mark Zuckerberg. I don't want to be a pale lizard looking dude. That guy's a dork. I don't care if he's a billionaire. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
Exactly.
man, good on him that he's training, but yeah, you know what I mean? Moves like a white belt. Like, I don't want to be a white belt. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah, I saw that.
so guys are coming into military and law enforcement because they want to prove what kind of men they are. So it's like, then they get into these discussions of, because I mean, we've all been around the government long enough to know that it doesn't do fuck all right. And then you get some kind of silly command that comes down from your leadership, and you're like, well, there's a better way to do it. And it's like, you end up getting into this kind of contention, right? And they're like, oh man, this generation, this new generation, they're just so entitled. They're just so entitled. And it's like, no, that's not what's going on. You're dismissing the real problem here. Okay. And your authority doesn't change reality. These kids know their options. Okay. And they're looking for something more. And I think what's actually going on is what a lot of people are interpreting as entitlement, at least in this line of work, or in the line of work of military law enforcement. I think what they're actually experiencing from people, those emotions are actually disappointment. Because it's like, man, I came here to be part of a specific type of culture, and this is not anything like I thought it was going to be.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And John, if I can state a couple of, wouldn't call them necessarily statistics, but just a few points. So I can't remember. It was a month ago, or a couple of months ago, possibly, when the Army Chief of Staff, General James McConville, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, he testified in Congress that there is only 23% of 17 to 24-year-olds, which is the cream of the crop of what, because it's the young men that consist of the infantry. Let's just be honest. I mean, that's the bulk of what we need in the Army specifically. But of that 23%, of that important demographic, only 9% are willing to serve. So I mean, that's very, very troublesome, right?
Yep.
And add to it some of the things you kind of alluded to. We got an increase in obesity. We got an increase in drug use. You add all that in, and that's a perfect storm of a disaster of being able to recruit. And let's face it, some of this problem is also retention. Some of the very same points that you're making is that there's less a desire to stick it out 20 or more years now too.
Yep.
So, and I think that, and we talked about this too, it does not help that we have just a leftist experiment with gender identity politics, with, unfortunately, critical race theory, Marxism crap, and then these vaccine mandates. The bulk of, whether people like it or not, the highest percentage of military personnel are more conservative and patriotic leaning, right?
Yep.
And so when you implement these types of policies, you are effectively telling conservatives that they don't belong in the military. And then another thing that we were talking about is that we're facing this, the vaccine mandate. The Biden administration's continuing to go down this road of forcing the military, both military personnel, civilians, and contractors, to take the vaccination that is being proven scientifically to not work. And
that's not even controversial.
It's not controversial at all.
And I'll just say this, Eric, because my company does business with them, I got hit with this too. So I just wanted to interject that too.
Yep.
Yeah, and so these vaccine mandates, we could see there's already been thousands. I forget the number. It's not been a huge amount, 4,000 maybe. I may be wrong on that, and maybe you know that number have been dismissed so far. But if this vaccine mandate continues and isn't squashed via the court system, then we're going to lose upwards of 100,000 service members, 75,000 within the Army, which is close to 7 divisions worth of soldiers. And think of missing 7 divisions. I mean, we can fight a whole war zone with less than 7 divisions,
Wow.
So yeah, it's daunting thinking about that. And they're glad to do it. And I'll add this, and I'll shut up on this and let you guys make some points, is that it's also a de facto political cleansing too, because of what we talked about, that the bulk of people or service members that do not want the vaccination, definitely by and large, are mainly conservatives. And so you get rid of 100,000 service members, the bulk of them being conservative, then you've got a good political cleansing, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely concerning. Now, I mean, John, I'll throw this to you then. Okay, if we can't recruit and we can't retain, then what is the ultimate outcome of that then? The big picture.
Yeah, I think I mean, on top of, the discharging 75,000 people from the Army, I mean, the Army missed a couple of years ago, the Army missed their recruiting goal by like 80,000. So that puts us like 150,000, like at least short. Like that's
Behind the curve.
right. And the GWAT, as great as that time lived was, right? I mean, we didn't do a bad job at making new enemies there. You know what I mean?
Mm-mm.
So, and I mean, when the I'll give you a good example, like the um when the Berlin Wall fell, it didn't stop people from being communists. Instead of coming over here, as spies and invading the country, they came here with passports.
Yep.
Right. And what did we do? What did we do last year? The whole, Operation Allied Refuge, right? Now we're importing people who clearly hate us and who culturally see people who are, Christians or non-believers as subservient to them or subhuman to them. And we just put them all over the country. And like we're
Yep.
just gonna act like that's gonna be cool. Like I'm honestly pessimistic about it. If I'm totally true, because
Mhm.
I
Yep.
lived in Europe for 3 years, and it's like, like, all right, let's say this. Like, you guys remember the Iran-Iraq Contra war, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Because in Islam, they allow polygamy, right? So these guys take multiple wives, procreate because that's the will of Allah. There was 250,000 men killed in that war, at least, and there was barely a blip in their population growth.
Yep.
Right,
That
and then
is
we
a
have
major concern.
yeah, and so we have an underpopulation problem as much as people are not aware of that, like, people are not having kids, so
Yeah,
we're
and
like
it's in a negative decline.
yeah,
If correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah, so it's
Long
like there's
story short, I think it's like point eight birth rate, something like that. Don't quote me on
Well,
that, but I know it's low.
and John, if I can add to your recruiting statistics, as of July, the Army this year was at 40% goal with only 3 months left in the fiscal year. So again, adding to what you said, it's a dire situation, and you kind of started alluding to it as well,
yeah,
is this very disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan was seen by all of the first world despots and despotic countries like Russia, like China, like North Korea. So I surmise that part of the reason why Russia invaded the Ukraine is because of the weakness displayed by this current administration in the withdrawal of Afghanistan, and not just that, but just other examples like we were talking about, the political correctness within inside the military, the reduction of the warrior culture in the military as well. Yeah, so
I think the other countries, they got it perfectly figured out. What America does not have figured out. And I'll give you a good example. I read Operation Anaconda, right? When I first went to Afghanistan back in '05, or excuse me, not then, but I first went to Afghanistan in '05, right? And then a couple years later, read the book Operation Anaconda. In that book, one of the first things that they say is the Afghans, their mentality towards the war was the Americans have all the watches, the Afghans have all the time. So, and I say that to illuminate the fact that for the way the U.S. conducts warfare in general, it's like we do it in cycles of election. So our enemies know that it's like if there's somebody like a Bush come in, eventually there's going to be somebody like an Obama. So we just basically have to just wait until that person comes in office before we show our asses. Then there's going to be that person gets he gets we get a new election. We get a guy like Trump who crushed ISIS for lack of a better word, and then we get a guy like Biden come in, and now you have the Afghan fallout, right? The most
Taliban's taken over Afghanistan again.
yeah, I mean,
And
and
Al Qaeda's back in too.
yeah,
Sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
yeah, it's like the only worse. Yeah, I mean, it was exactly the same thing. Watching ISIS take over a place I was deployed in. It was like,
Same here,
okay, I
buddy.
guess I wasted a year and a half of my life there. Then I see Afghanistan fall. Like, oh, that's great. I wasted a year there, and that's just time. I've lost nothing in comparison to some other guys, right? Like I have guys that just couldn't come back from what they've experienced over there, and they ended up taking permanent solutions to temporary problems. And the guys that are just like that are infinitely broken, marriage is broken, guys having issues connecting with their children because they didn't really watch them grow up and they just became a different person in that year. And it's like so many things that broken. So like I said, these kids are smart. They know their options. They know what's going on. They're a lot more in tune to these social issues than we give them credit for. So it's like, why would I put my ass on the line for that? So that way, that could be me. Fuck that. Like, can you blame them?
Yeah, and I think you're making a point there. That is one of the other factors in this that a lot of young people are realizing. It's like Ukraine, the war in Ukraine has turned a lot of young U.S. citizens away from the military as well, because you're looking at a first world enemy in Russia, a nuclear threat now.
Yep.
And you got what's going to be some of the most rich targets in a nuclear war. Some of the first targets are going to be military posts, for obvious strategic reasons. And so it's like, man, screw that. I'm not joining the military and first
And for
world
the
threat.
record,
Go ahead.
I don't think these kids are cowards. Like that's not what I'm saying.
No.
I
Yeah.
don't. I
And
don't
I'm
think.
not actually meaning that either.
Yeah,
Yep. Go
and like,
ahead.
but I just want to make that clear because I know some people might misinterpret what we're saying here. I think what it is that they're seeing that the leadership is perfectly willing to throw everybody under the bus. And it's like, look, if I don't have a strong leader, I don't have America doesn't have my back. The people on the inside don't have my back. I'm just out there flapping and I'm supposed to be destroyed in all these kinds of ways. Like I at least expect some kind of glory or some type of, it's got to be worth the cost. And it's like every institution supporting the military around the military and now within the military has made it to where, people are really questioning if it's worth the cost. Guys retire or not even, they're like, you know what? It's not worth it. I know I've got 17 years in, but 3 years feel like an eternity. So I'm going to get out now. Like that's significant. That
Yeah, it
there's,
is.
and no one's asking these kind of questions,
Well, and excuse me, add to the fact that um, when when our enemies see us pull out, so do our allies. And so you got, I mean, think of what we did to our Afghan partners. You think that the Afghan people that risked their lives, and a lot of people lost their lives that were Afghani. You think that they're willing to go to war with the U.S. again and help us again? It's a low probability, and other countries
Yeah.
will see it that way as well.
Our allies and foreign countries, they've got a long memory. Like America, it's like you can tell by the way people use TikTok. It's like their attention span is like boring, boring, boring. It's like but the people, they're not as distracted. They're aware, they're in tune. They've got their thumb on the pulse, so they've got a much longer memory on what's going on, and we've shown them absolute worst we can of America in the last few years.
And then I'll just and we'll move on after this point, I think, is we gave up Bagram, which was right there, a strategic and awesome airfield right there close to China and Russia. So yeah, it was a disaster. So I guess I feel bad. It's not funny. I'm just it's kind of, I feel like it's insane.
Yeah, it
Well,
would be comical if it wasn't so sad.
yeah, exactly. So we just hope that, I mean, I guess what's the answer to this? Well, it's going to have to take a cultural reversal.
Yeah.
Political reversal. We've got to reverse this this leftist march with inside the military, or it's not going to get better. It's going to continue to get worse. And our Constitution, our republic's in trouble if that doesn't change.
Yeah, I agree. I've been thinking a lot as far as like what to do at my level, because it's like I don't want to be that guy that's telling other people to go run for office and stuff like that. But I think it's definitely um, at a minimum, at least get yourself strong. I mean, I'll say that because I'm at least doing that little bit. At least get your body strong, see how you feel about yourself, and then encourage someone else to get strong too. Because if you're able to defend yourself physically, I think that makes you a lot more capable in terms of defending yourself intellectually. I mean, look, let's say like if two guys are in a room and one guy can fight and the other guy can't. I mean, if one guy has all the force and he's like, well, you know, 4 times 4 is 12. And that's clearly wrong. But if he says it enough and you guys take it to that far, so it's like, get power, get strong, and then use it for good.
Well, and I think what is important from that, John, is that strong people, capable people with all the skills that we espouse, you espouse, that you teach, that we teach, is an asset for our nation. Aaron and I spoke about this a little bit on one of our Gear and Mindset shows, is that regardless of how the left, especially the anti-Second Amendment left, see us, we are still assets to our nation for our national security. Again, whether they like it or not, it's a fact. And what you're saying is that's how we remain assets, is remaining strong and capable. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we've kind of closed up that topic, and let's what do we think about talking about law enforcement? We have a similar schism within recruitment and retention in law enforcement, right?
Yeah. It's unfortunate. I mean, I spoke to a guy a couple weeks ago, and he was like, "Hey, yeah, because he's on the combatives group, and he was like, yeah, that group inspired me to go out. Guy became a jiu-jitsu blue belt. He's got into gun classes and all that stuff, and he was like, got a wild hair up his ass, decided to go be a cop.
Nice.
Quit within 2 months.
Really?
Yeah, because because again, for the same thing, it parallels the same things that we're seeing in the military. It's like, he's here to go and do some good, right? He made himself a powerful man, powerful, capable man, and he goes into an institution that's supposed to be for powerful, capable men, and instead it's a feminized workplace, and there's no competition for men within a feminized workplace. Men don't compete with women, not physically, not violently. That's just not a thing, and he just had no desire to be a part of that. Now the guy is going out and he's gonna do like internet marketing or some shit. Like totally lost a capable dude, an asset to internet marketing, because we can't, like, why is it that in police organizations we're mentioning anything along the lines of toxic masculinity, let alone toxic masculinity in general? I mean,
Yeah,
what don't we want toxically masculine cops to go and beat the shit out of murderers and rapists? I mean,
yeah,
I know I do.
absolutely. Yeah,
Like,
yeah. There is righteous violence. Now, granted, we're talking about within the confines of the law and use of force law. But again, I think that's one of the main points, is that law enforcement does not have the backing from their mayors. Some, obviously some municipalities do, but by and large, you have a movement of that the cities, the municipalities are not supporting their law enforcement. They're also prosecuting them for political reasons. I mean, most of the time, luckily, we're still seeing these police officers uh, get off of those charges and exonerated. But I mean, in the case of was it Derek Chauvin, he rightfully went to jail. But these other police officers are being prosecuted for political reasons by DAs that hate law enforcement. And so these police officers think, well, I'm not gonna arrest this person tonight. That looks a little risky, yeah, but I think I can let this one go,
yep,
because I don't want to get in a confrontation and possibly a use of force incident where I'm prosecuted.
Well, on that point, Eric, I was going to say we need tough men on the streets, like you said, John, to whoop criminals' asses before they have to go to deadly force. I mean, and another thing, taking chokeholds away from cops. What better how many techniques are better than if you got somebody's back and just put him to sleep
And
with the
safer
with
for both people, right?
and I yeah, who wouldn't rather take a little nap for 10 seconds, wake up in cuffs, than to be beat the heck up or shot or tased, etc.?
And I think that is the point. We're all jujitsu practitioners. We know that you don't have to necessarily, and there's strikes may have to come out, but in many cases, if we have police officers that are good at wrestling and jujitsu, they don't have to be super high level, but just understand the proper tactics and techniques. They don't have to necessarily beat the beat the criminal up, but they can certainly subdue them effectively and take them to jail.
yeah,
You know,
Well, and then speaking of some information or some insight into what we're talking about here, um, Chuck Haggard, one of our favorite guests, and someone who really has the pulse of law enforcement, especially in the heartland. He his concept, right, and it's not too groundbreaking. It's lots of force early on, so you have less force later on in the incident, right?
yep,
And to your guys' point about retention of law enforcement, and it's the same thing with it mirrors military, I think, which is what you guys were saying. He was saying back when all the riots and stuff were going down in Ferguson, Missouri, he said every single person I know right now that can get out is getting out right now.
Lots of early retirements.
Yeah, and what effect has that made, right? Like we're I think right now what the problem is common, right? The common trait in terms of the problem between military and law enforcement is shitty leadership, spineless, cowardly leadership that are dismissing valid concerns of their subordinates. So in that era, that post-Ferguson era, when everybody got out, it was also a shitty time to be in the military because that was what 2014,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, so people are getting out the military, right? So you have terrible leaders, politicians that are called leaders, and so what happens is you basically have all the shitty officers and shitty soldiers that stay in the military and stay in police force and be like, look, all they got to do is stick around long enough and they'll get promoted. So those are the
Yep.
guys who are running the show now, right? That's almost 10 years ago. Those
So
are the
it's an
guys in charge,
exponential.
right? I was at Fort Bliss the other day. I seen a guy who was a colonel and another guy who was a sergeant major. And on the right shoulder, as a soldier, what you do is you wear a patch of the unit you deployed with, right? So it's like this guy's a command sergeant major. He's an E9, right? Colonel, very high ranks, right? So they're at least in charge of a battalion. I imagine they're in charge of a brigade. So they've been in at least 20 years. So it's 2022 and 20 years, right? From 2002. And these guys don't have combat patches. What kind of
Wow.
person what kind of soldier do you have to be where you are okay to not deploy while every soldier in the army is deploying, right? Where less than 1% of Americans are serving in the global war on terror. What kind of person you have to be? Those are the type of people that are in charge.
Well, John, you bring up a good point because when I first joined the Army back in well, it was early 2001.
Yeah.
And then when I was at my first unit in Korea, it was like, man, you saw somebody with the combat patch, man, you're like, that dude or that woman's been somewhere, and so it was uncommon at that point. But then, of course, we had 9/11. And then all of us started going. It's like, if you don't, just like you said, if you don't have a combat patch, you're like, what have you been doing?
Yeah. Right.
And it is kind of odd. We're starting to see that. And I mean, you can probably attest to this even better than I, but I'm seeing a lot more military personnel now. Now, granted, we're talking, E6 and below, or that it's very common now that they don't have combat patches. But yeah, you're
And that
right. But
makes
a
sense because you
colonel
promote
and
fast, right?
yeah, go ahead.
An army you promote fast. So that makes sense, right? Where you're like E6 and below, or you're like a young captain or something like that. But like you're a colonel and
Oh,
a
yeah.
E9, like that shit raises some eyebrows. Like, what have you guys have been doing? Because I mean, in that time when you was deploying, if you didn't have a combat patch, like you were seen as a buddy fucker.
Yep.
Like you were the
Yeah.
guy that was like letting everybody, like, man, you're the reason why we went from 1 year to 15-month deployments, dude, because you fucking assholes like you are hiding behind EFMP, which is a exceptional family member
Yep.
program, or going to recruiting forever or something like that. So that way you guys can stay in the rear while everybody else deploys. Like it was like, and it's not saying that you guys got to go out there and go stack bodies and all that other cringe nonsense, but it's like you do your duty. And it's like, as a man, as a soldier, you do your duty. And a lot of guys, that are in charge, man, they were spending a lot of years, a lot of time not doing their duty. And a lot of those guys are in charge right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably. I mean, that's a good point. I didn't really think about it like that, John. That's a real good point. Is that those are likely the bulk of the individuals that are in charge now. That's a real good point. Yeah. Yeah. And that's not who we want in charge. We want, we actually, to make a point, is we still have the most combat experienced military that has likely been, in our history, just because of the duration of the wars. But, we're soon losing that. We are actually starting to lose that. But, yeah. Yeah, excuse me. It's certainly something that the American people need to try to change, because they are part of the change, as we stated. They got to vote the right people in office, both at the executive branch and the legislature, and support. Obviously we we got cases with COVID vaccination mandates going through the Supreme Court, or excuse me, going through the federal court systems. We need all of that to be, at a minimum leaning conservative. So we'll see what happens.
Well,
Well,
John,
John, go ahead, Aaron.
I've got a question so we can lighten the mood a little bit. What do you guys say?
Yeah, sure.
Have a little bit of a jam session here. So now, number one, you said you lived in New York City. Do you still live in New York City?
Oh no, I live in an even worse place. I live in New Mexico right now. So, no, yeah, you cannot pay me enough money to move back to New York City. I mean, it's awesome and in a lot, but I got to take that place in doses. It's just too busy.
Yeah, I was thinking, man, how does he run this training business in New York?
Oh, yeah,
so, but then, so it looks like you've got some dry fire gear there in the background.
yeah, yeah. I got the go fast, don't suck decals up.
Go fast, don't suck. Nice.
Is that what, does it say that, or are you just saying that
Oh,
that's what you
that's
call?
legit. That's legit the name, man. Like gofastsuck.net. Like that's legit the name. And you can like
Awesome.
just like stick these things everywhere. They're decals, so you could just take them off and throw them on, and throw them in a bag or something like that if you're traveling. So
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
gonna have to get some of those because I love my Ben Stoker targets, but you gotta fix them. What I do right now is I've got a large cork board that
mhm.
I'll make my arrays and change them around a little bit, but still, I like the idea of those decals.
Yeah, I got a free dry fire target that I print out for people in case they just want to print something. And it's like one shape is like a IDPA target, and on the left side is like the USPSA A zone. So like people can go, if they go on my website, they can print those out, and it has like 50 reps, and you can get that done in like 5 to 10 minutes. And so it's like, if people like my class, I'm like, hey, look, if you want to really compliment me and you can't write a review or something like that, at least keep training, because that'll be the best. That'll be the best thing. If you could just do this, you'll be ready when the time comes.
Well, John, you kind of started down the road I was wanting to go, and Aaron rightly so led us in a jovial direction. Is what are you up to right now with Deeds of Arms? Give us a synopsis of what you've been doing and anything that you got in the near future. I mean, plug anything you want to plug. And
Oh yeah. The main thing is just trying to offer as much value as I can for free. I mean, this is like, I still have a day job, so this is mostly a labor of love. I the name Deeds of Arms, where that comes from, it's not just to be esoteric with the language, but it's the idea of action with weapons. It's like on demand, on command. This is about action. It's not necessarily about what you know. It's about what you can do and what can you do right now. And the name Deeds of Arms came from squires and knights. They used to arrange battle drills in the late 13th, 14th century, and that's what they used to do during peacetime to hone their skills for when war came. So that way they was already well trained for battle, and it was also a way for them to prove to their countrymen and to prove within their communities what kind of men they were. Right? It's like the whole thing of like the knight with shiny armor has never tested his metal concept, and so that's where that comes from. And so what I do with Deeds of Arms is I have what I've done with the curriculum is essentially try to make like a career path, so that way people can go from having zero knowledge, right? Zero skills, and they'll get all the training methods in terms of what they need to do with the concealed carry, like the concealed carry skills. Then I teach about 4 hours of that. Then we get into 4 hours of retention shooting, thumb pectoral index, shooting from a compressed three, compressed three. And then then we go into dealing with the clinch, fighting on walls. Then we go into kind of dealing with being pinned, as well as dealing with edge weapons and so on. So like I want to take people from a level 0 to having these skills that they need as for in terms of training methods. So that way they can take these classes and keep on training. So that way, if they, I inspire people to go to like ECQC classes and other stuff. So that way they can get the most out of training that way, because it's like another thing of, I'm adamantly against teaching tactics and techniques at the same time. I think people just end up being bad at both. So if they focus on the skills when they get there, they just focus on just the hard skills. When they get there and they learn the tactics, they learn about muck, they learn about all the things, the criminal assault paradigm, then they're going to be able to take away so much more because they've spent time practicing on these things, or courses dedicated just to the skills that come with dealing with how combatives happens.
Awesome. I say this fairly often to all the guys that we enjoy and bring us along in this, just like you. I'm looking forward to getting in one of your classes sometime, and we've talked about at some point we could have you here too. And now that I'm getting more enveloped in my gym, I think there'll be room for more of that. So yeah, well, cool, well, man. That sounds great.
Going nowhere, so it's
what's that now?
So I'm not going nowhere, so it's like, you got my number, so we can arrange that anytime. We just gotta, make it sooner than later. So there's no regrets in life.
Yep. Kind of like right. what we've been talking about.
Where about in New Mexico are you, buddy?
I'm in southern New Mexico, about an hour north of El Paso.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll be headed up to Albuquerque the end of October to teach ground combatives. And then in December, I'm going back to Wichita to work with Starting Strength, teaching the lift, fight, shoot camp.
Cool.
So that'll be 2 days. So people are going to learn how to lift. People are going to learn how to shoot. People are going to learn how to fight, put it all together. So that's a pretty badass camp. We did it back in April. And it was pretty awesome watching Mark Ripito and Nick Delgadillo do their thing, and it's definitely a pleasure working with those guys.
Yeah, that's a legit class, man. I mean, there's just I have to say, I just think there's no better strength program out there, for the bulk of people, and then having you there for the combatives and the shooting piece, man. That's legit.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and everybody seemed to really enjoy it. It was just a great time. Everybody was like really motivated, really happy, just enjoyed it. I was surprised because that's a lot of physical work. They're going to be lifting, and then they went from that to being on the range for a few hours, then went into the gym. So like everybody stood motivated the whole time. So it was a great time.
Very cool. We just had Nick on our show. I don't know if you caught that.
Oh yeah, I listened to the whole thing. Day before yesterday.
Yeah, Nick's a great dude, and again, you're probably tracking. He was at the range master class with us, and man, he sent me the latest, or sent Aaron as well, the latest Starting Strength book.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm rereading it, and I'm realizing that as much as I read the book, I'm getting more out of reading again. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's cool.
Well, you know what they say about books, right? Good books.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good books are like good friends. You got to revisit them often. And
absolutely.
That happens every time I read, or if I read a book a second, third time, always get more out of it.
Yeah. I like rereading books for certain, and especially the ones that help us on the path. And that's certainly one of them.
Yep.
So, well, John, I think we're headed towards the close of the show, man. How can folks find you online in your website?
Oh, I mean, it's deedsofarms.com is I'm easy to find. John Valentine on Facebook, YouTube, and on Instagram, I'm John V_actual.
Awesome. And like we normally do, we'll put that in the show notes for people if they're currently listening and driving, so that they can go in there and find that information as well. Well, awesome, John. Man, it's been awesome having you on again. I mean, again, it's not going to be the last.
Yeah, definitely. every time we connect, it's always just like, good friends just getting together again. So I love it. So I'm looking forward to that.
Amen.
Awesome.
Well, you guys have a good night. I'm gonna play some guitar.
Nice. I gotta go to bed. I got a 04:30 rise for jiu-jitsu, so I'm gonna go get me some sleep.
Awesome.
So-
Well, you guys have a good evening then. All right.
Yep.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.